Welcome to today's webinar. It'll be just a chat about education as a springboard to continuous learning. From the Youth at the Crossroads series, we've heard that youth are keenly aware of the fact that it's a fast-changing world around them, and they want to be prepared for it. They recognize the value of being challenged and developing resilience, and including an education that moves beyond passive instruction toward active, relevant learning that equips them to adapt, think critically, and lead. Public education must become a springboard for lightning. Drawing on examples from Canada and beyond, we saw in the newsletter that I featured this week that some schools are beginning to embrace innovation, blending foundational knowledge with hands-on experience, creativity, and civic engagement. The question is, and what we'll be exploring today is, will the education system catch up to what youth already know they need? So let me begin with the first question, and I'll pose this one to you, Emerson. While you're not currently in formal schooling, do you feel that your past schooling prepared you to keep learning beyond graduation? And if so, how? And if not, what was missing?
Thank you. Okay, so the answer for me on this is yes, and it had to do less with the specific content in the courses and more with the small class sizes and with the profs that I had. So my first degree was in political science and philosophy, and part of the beauty was small seminars in third and fourth year of undergraduate with a prof that was just an exceptional prof who really challenged you to ask the question why. Don't just say, I believe this, because I kind of got into the habit at the time being in student union things, just advocating. You advocate, but you don't say, I believe this because X, Y, Z. So that was very helpful. And then for my master's, which was in education philosophy, my supervisor would keep saying, what do you think on this? And he was this esoteric prof that didn't do any research, just did philosophy, read philosophy all the time. And he would just keep saying, what do you think on this? So argue your own point on this. And I still think about what that prof Ian Froh said. And then the final piece, the PhD, even though it was in theology, was again about how you work through a lot of research and how you stay focused on it and how you make unique arguments that are supposed to add to the body of knowledge in that particular area. So the degrees were all in philosophy or theology, so not practical, but they were all about working through the question why. And then that applies well in business or in politics because you're trying to figure out what is the simple why of the organization or of the person. Is that clear? And are you able to create an argument, which is a statement plus a series of points that support that statement, and just being really structured in that way. So for me, yes, but it has really come down to the profs and to small scale one-on-one or small group seminars, and then the final piece being a lot of independent reading. The focus in all these was go out and read things that you enjoy across a number of areas and love that and really get into that. And that applies well to, again, business or investing, because that's the same thing you're doing, just in different areas.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent. Thank you. And by the way, much of your education, of course, was in the advanced ed beyond high school. But Jeet, you're still in high school, you're not? How do you handle this question? Are you feeling that your schooling currently is preparing you to keep learning beyond graduation? Have you got the learning bug, or are you just a passive recipient?
Well, it's kind of half and half. It really depends. As the previous speaker spoke, a lot of it was dependent on interactions one-on-one. For example, for in his case, it was a professor. In my case, it was my physics teacher. He's the one that is the stereotypical teacher that isn't the one that teaches from the textbook. He always has a demo to show. He always shows us how the practical applications of physics are used. And because of that, all of the students in that class have become organically interested in physics. Whereas with most of our classes, for example, math, are very rigid and for the purpose of getting into university or simply for the purpose of getting good grades. it is an extremely rigid system. Every class gets a note package. Every teacher covers one lesson per day. There's no room for questions. The only time you can get help is after school. So most people's natural interest or instinct for math was kind of killed off. Instead of having a natural desire to be better at math or ask questions about calculus, for example, one of the more creative fields of mathematics, it was kind of just, how do I get to this next test? How do I do well on this next test? And then how do I move on from there? So I feel like, again, it depends on the person to person, but overall, I don't think the system is set up in a way that would make me feel interested in learning past a certain level. It's mainly to learn to what you need to do rather than learn for your personal interest.
Interesting, the importance of the distinction between teaching and learning. Rajiv, do you want to add anything? I mean, you're just a recent graduate, if I'm not mistaken.
I am, yeah. It's a good memory there. Yeah, just graduated from Weber Academy and I'm headed off to be an IR student in DC.
Little advertising.
Yeah, a little advertising, yeah. But I would say from my experience, I did learn quite a bit and it did prepare me. At least in terms of curriculum, knowing math is pretty. Oh, if there's any engineering or math people in here, I apologize. I'm an IR student, so what I'm about to say may, make you sweat a little bit. But in terms of just learning curriculum, like basic math, yeah, math isn't too complicated in that sense. I think where things get a little more interesting is with social sciences, which gets political at times, because, if you compare the math curriculums of a place like Ontario or Alberta, the only difference is really the kind of scale of mathematics. Like Ontario might stop here, Alberta might stop here. But with social sciences, there's a lot of different choices you can make. And I noticed, at least from my experience, two things that were missing. Number one was interplay amongst preparing, I guess, students for understanding how careers work and that they're not very linear in nature. They tend to bounce around a lot. And understanding that, look, if you do something that is like computer science, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be just a computer scientist. My cousin, for example, is someone who is a computer scientist, works for Nutrien, which doesn't just do that, just computer science and stuff like that and consulting like that. They produce a product. And I think getting people to kind of understand that specifically, maybe industry specific things, maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself, but I think might be an interesting take for university or for both universities and schools. And really, I think the second thing was also exposure, right?
Mhm.
Like a lot of people don't know about a lot of different kinds of career paths. They think about really the degree. Like I want to go into finance. It's like, cool. What part of finance? And they're like, well, I was thinking maybe investment banking or some other form of banking. And it's what like, well, those aren't the only things that you can do with a finance degree, right? The list is infinite. My father works in oil and gas, for example. He was a finance guy. So I think if we're able to get people to try and think outside of the box from a young age, that would help a lot. At least helping people get further on in life. I apologize if this is too much rambling for you guys.
Oh, no,
I should have prepared a little more.
yeah, it's an important distinction. I mean, we noted in the newsletter, and we certainly noted in our various discussions on learning or on development, that what young people need is not necessarily what older people need, and that foundational learning of getting math, getting reading, writing, arithmetic as foundational, and then moving on to, as Emerson pointed out, and Jeet as well, the questions of why. Why in philosophy is even about existence. So who am I? Why am I? How do I know I am? Okay, second question. What does active learning mean to you? And have you experienced it in any meaningful way during your education? And by active learning, I mean, moving beyond simply the passive receipt of information, that foundational learning, if I may, and something that goes on, or we expect will be go on lifelong. So, what does active mean to you? Jeet, I think you touched on this when you talked about the physics teacher. Why don't you kick this one off and maybe, and I don't mind you repeating what you raised earlier, but go ahead. Tell us what you view as active learning.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the best examples of active learning is purely just demos. There's other ways to learn than to read and watch videos. If you show someone what can happen when you do something, especially with something as easily applied as physics, it really makes an interest of it. For me and Rajesh, for example, we're both interested in politics, law, and policy, and that's why we joined the Youth Policy Council. But this was sparked from somewhere. I'm not, for my case, it was kind of an interest in history. I had a few friends that introduced me to what the world of policy meant for people, the impact it could have on individuals. So then it became a topic of great interest to me. It's like, if this is something I can learn about, if this is something I can impact, then I will actually have a say and making a positive impact for many people. So then I went out and found resources. I know a lot of people have done the same. They just need some sort of spark, and then if they have the will for it, they can find the resources for it. If they get resources alongside the spark, then it's something that can is really impactful and it's world changing. Even I feel like it's very important to have some sort of spark and for something, anything at all. But I feel like in a lot of cases that's lacking, or a lot of people are discouraged from going those routes due to traditional stereotypes regarding those areas.
It's interesting. In my own experience, I still remember a Mr. Davis, and Mr. Davis was the science teacher in grade 7, and that science was the beginning of exploring, not just absorbing. And we opened up a watch to find out how the watch worked, and that triggered a curiosity that I guess lasted for a long while of opening things up, not just physically, but opening up ideas, as Emerson expressed earlier, as a form of active learning throughout our lives. Rashish, you want to add anything here?
I think most people have kind of said what I really believe with active learning.
Yeah.
I'm a person who appreciates a really hands-on kind of view. I ended up getting interested in, despite the fact that I'm an IR student, I guess science, when I went to science museums and they would have like those interactive like pieces that you could play with. Play's a really good way to learn. Yeah, it doesn't matter what age you're at. I learn a lot of history from history video games, for example. Not that you should do that. It's a good way to get introduced to it. Yeah. And I guess one thing that's maybe worth mentioning though is also if we're trying to get people to consider learning about lots of different kinds of things, right? And be more proactive with their learning, try keep driving farther and farther deeper into the rabbit hole. It's very easy for them to get discouraged if they don't have proper support. Um, let's be honest, if the more detailed you go into things, the more complex they get. And I can speaking from my own experience as someone who is an atrocious math student, when I got went further down the rabbit hole with math, you feel discouraged because you feel like you're not good enough. And really helping to boost the self-confidence of students is I feel something that we should maybe think about. It, everyone mentions it, like, oh, we need to boost self-confidence, we need to boost self-confidence. But I guess how teachers do that really, I'm not entirely sure. And that's something from a policy standpoint even that we should all consider.
Well, taking these pieces so far and reflecting back on what Emerson shared earlier about owning your own viewpoint as opposed to being a passive recipient and going through life passively, as one does with a video game, for example. And while you may be learning something from certain forms of video games, we cited it in another article recently about people wasting so much time in life as victims of call centers that put you on hold for hours or sitting at red lights, etc. But then in it's a passive form of spending one's life where you're really not learning much at all. You're being entertained as opposed to making choices. Emerson, your turn. What do you want to add here?
That is active learning for me is going out and talking with people. And maybe that doesn't apply as much in the sciences or in math, But if you're studying IR or political science, then you need to go out and talk with the diplomats or the politicians or whoever it is that is actively on the front lines. Because then you can see, okay, I'm reading about this theory or this article on something, and that makes sense or that doesn't make sense. And then the more that you actually, and you can engage, with lots of different networks in the real world, and then you can see, okay, this absolutely doesn't make sense. This is just academics talking to themselves. So it's taking what you're reading and then really quickly trying to go out and talk with as many relevant people as you can in that area. So that to me is what active learning is really quickly testing whatever your thinking is based on your reading with people, so that it can be refined as rapidly as possible.
Sounds like good foundational principles to run a successful business. I know as an investor, I am always intrigued by companies that spend a lot of time in the market learning from their customers as opposed to telling their customers what they need or want, finding out what they need or want, and constantly adapting to the changes that exist in the market. So you touched on an important principle, each of you, for success in the future. Okay, how can foundational subjects like math, science, I'm going to start out with you, Emerson, on this one. How can foundational subjects like math, science, and history, because this was not your forte, be taught in ways that also build adaptability and curiosity?
Well, I mean, for math and science, I think it gets back to what Jeet was saying earlier, is having the right professors or teachers that love the subject and try to make it as real as possible, rather than creating an environment where students feel pressure to just play to the exam to get good marks. So to me, that's what's key on the math. Well, on the math side, on the science side, I think doing lab-based research is really important. I mean, that's something I briefly thought about going into biology, chemistry for university, and worked in a lab at the U of A in grade 12, and that was helpful because you're actually going in and doing experiments and seeing, oh, this actually has an application beyond the the grade 11 or 12 curriculum. And then on the history side, I think, I mean, for me, this is one that has grown as I've gotten older, is just spending as much time as you can reading history, because you realize that this has a strong application to politics, essentially, and it's good to read and learn more about human nature. So that's one that has grown slowly. But the people who I find are interested in history tend to be people who are very self-driven. For example, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, when people ask him, how do you learn about politics? He says, history, history, history. Mm-hmm. Those are his 3 recommendations. You just learn about people so you can better navigate politics.
Well, it's really interesting, and you've touched on something I never thought I would mention here, but I had a teacher in high school for a particular subject that I was thirsting to learn about, and I think as a byproduct of my mother's interest in history. And that teacher taught us nothing. What she in essence did is dealt with history as a series of things to memorize. Dates, places, people, events. It was as dry as they come. I was so disappointed. The positive of it is I knew there was more to history than simply the memorizing and getting the Greek and Roman empires together and figure out which came first. But that relevance of history, and then to learn later that history is really not about facts. It's a lot about interpretation. When you read Toynbee or the series I have up here, Will and Ariel Durant, who spent a life putting together 12 volumes about history, and much of it interpretive of what was the meaning of that event and how what impact did that event have 5 years later, 100 years later, on different cultures, on the people itself, the politics in general of history. It's an incredible subject, and yet it was initially taught in that dry manner of sit there, memorize, and I'll test you on your memorization of the sequence of these events. by the way, my learning at that time was not active. It was putting a tape recorder under my pillow with the recorded sequence of these dates to try and memorize them. It didn't work. That's probably what led me into brain research later on. Okay, enough of that. Fourth question. Are emerging technologies like AI being integrated into education, your education? Were they? Do you expect that they will be in a way that helps you think critically about them or just use them? So the question here is about the relevance of AI in education as a passive contributor or as a stimulant to learning and learning more. A bit of a trick question here. There is no right answer, but Jeet, you're in school. AI arrived in spades in 2022 with ChatGPT. Are you finding AI involved, playing a role in your education? And is it stimulating critical thinking or just becoming part of those passive tools?
I really think it depends on how one uses it because honestly, ChatGPT in particular has wreaked havoc on our school systems. Um, what's happening currently is that teachers do not have enough time to go through content effectively, so they're already cramming for exams. With the addition of AI, the traditional methods of checking for your understanding, let's say assignments, or let's say something of that manner, has been completely evaporated, essentially. There is no manner in which they can check that from a project. In fact, a lot of my teachers have moved in-class testing more and more often because they simply do not have the time to verify everything, and they also don't have the resources to integrate AI correctly. So what most students are doing, such as myself, is that they're using AI. I've been using AI for 2 years now, and I'm an avid user. I quite like it, but I recognize that a lot of it might harm my learning if I don't use it as a tool, but rather as a clutch or a vice, you could say. So I feel like it's important that people do use AI, but mostly at the current stage in time, it's used privately or it's used if one knows how to use it. For example, as I said earlier, I use it for a lot of things. I usually mainly for editing. I use it mainly to give me some ideas. Um, I use it as a basic level, but I try not to make it replace my ideas, but rather refine them. I feel like that's the main place where AI should be used. However, it's very easy to get caught up in it, especially when you're running out of time on an assignment. You just stick in a question, it will give you a perfectly detailed answer, and you will probably get the grade for it. And that's the unfortunate truth of the school system right now.
As there are moments for truth and confession, I will confess that I used an encyclopedia from time to time when I was in high school, putting together putting together articles or responses or writing. So copying is not new to AI. The encyclopedia played a role for some of us, and I confess, Miss Gouldy, that I turned in several papers, not particularly well crafted, copied directly from the encyclopedia. Anyway, Emerson, your turn.
Interesting what you're saying, Jake, just on that.
A little louder, I can't hear you there.
I can't hear me right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Oh, great. Just saying, interesting on what you're saying, Jeet, about the havoc that it's wreaking within school systems. I think on my side, it's important not to use AI, say ChatGPT, to write articles. I think that's where it's crossing a line, is where it's actually where you're asking it to, uh, be your voice. That's a problem. That's just intellectually dishonest. So that to me is the line, not to cross, where it's very valuable is serving as a resource to help interrogate different ideas to expedite learning. So you might be interested in a particular area for investment. So in our case, we're looking at critical minerals, rare earths, and looking at different mines. And I don't know I don't know a lot about a month ago, the different steps in the rare earths process, from excavation to processing, separation, magnet production, etc. But you can sit with AI or with ChatGPT and work through those questions up to a pretty significant amount of detail, all the way down to the economics of every piece, and then work through, okay, what are the different mines in Canada or Australia or the US or elsewhere that we should be thinking about, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can ask ChatGPT to be a contrarian on this. Here are certain things I'm thinking through. Play the role of a contrarian investor and come up with all the reasons why this won't work. And alongside the positive side. So you can kind of play around with it to test your thinking and deepen your thinking and go, I think, deeper and faster than you could by just Googling things and trying to come up with your own resources. So
I agree.
it's a means to expedite learning. And there's still something, this business leader in Britain at the British Chamber of Commerce years ago when ChatGPT was becoming a thing, said that she thought that anybody who doesn't use ChatGPT or AI as a means to learn is failing in their ambition. And I do think that's true. People should be using this to essentially be learning on steroids if they want to learn and test themselves. But they shouldn't be using it to write things.
But you made a very important distinction. That is you're using AI in an interactive manner
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
be learning, which is not a passive process of simply taking it from the encyclopedia, as I referenced I did, or taking AI and simply putting an article together under your name or otherwise. You're using it in an interactive way to explore a topic of which you knew very little, and you're learning more as you go. And as you go, being able to dig deeper faster than you might have been able to do otherwise.
Yeah, faster, and then test it in the
So
real
it's
world.
that process that we're hoping the schools will engage in and teach people how to use tools like that, how to use a book, how to use an encyclopedia, how to use a friend, how to use another, how to use a market, how to use ChatGPT. So the last question is, what lessons do you think public schools could learn from, and this is now the private-public competition, what lessons do you think public schools could learn from private? Remember the Weber Academy that Rajesh was at? And by the way, Rajesh had to bail out, as did Natalie. They could learn from alternative education models that might better support student success and engagement. The intent here is to look at, make a comparison, a personal comparison between the public system and the alternatives that are emerging, which we call private or alternative. Alternative education models are, give me ChatGPT at grade 7, teach me how to use it, and it'll teach me all that I need in that curriculum in half the time. Anyway, I'm answering my own question. Emerson, why don't you start off on this one, and then we'll let Jeet do the wrap up.
I think for me, it goes back to my first answer, and I'm not as familiar with the public-private system in Canada or with the private system, just because I was schooled in Alberta from K to 12, and it's mostly public. And I was in Edmonton, and it's mostly public there, whereas I think Calgary has more private schools. And then my later education was on the UK side. But what I do like about the private system in Britain is, again, it's very small. It's very tutorial based and very essay based, where the idea is that you write. So for Oxford, Cambridge, you and the schools, the high schools feeding into that, the idea is that you have a tutor, and every week you write an essay. You have to read a book and then write a 2,500 word essay arguing a point on that book or article, and then sit down one-on-one with the tutor who will grill you in person. So you can't escape. And that makes people very sharp, because you actually have to do the reading, you have to condense it, you have to make an argument, and then do it with somebody who is extremely knowledgeable in that area. I think that that's useful for ChatGPT, because you can't hide. You can't make something up and then fake knowledge, because you'll be found out in the first 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. So the more that we can move towards that type of model that involves essays and small group intensive discussion with a tutor, I think the better, because you're putting people under significant pressure, and that's good, I think, at a young age. So that would be the kind of thing that I think public schools should be doing. In the UK, on the private side, technically, they have a lot of resources, so they are able to do that. I know it's probably challenging, yeah, to do.
interesting that the tutoring model has a parallel called
Called what? Parenting?
parenting. I mean,
Exactly. Yes.
tutoring.
Yes.
The difficulty the public system has, of course, is it's a classroom of 30. You're dealing with a very large family where individualized attention, called tutoring, is quite challenging. Although with AI now, I've been reading some material of the education system being completely flipped on its head positively about the teacher now knowing what the individual needs to know and what the individual's learning styles are, and being able to shape information for those students personally, because AI, when used as an aid to the teacher, does the basic education. The teacher does that counseling, that tutoring. And so there's a partnership envisioned in the future. Jeet, you want to add anything here? I know we jumped in and elaborated quite a bit on our own, but what's been your experience, or what is your experience?
Interestingly enough, I'm part of the IB curriculum that pairs with the Alberta curriculum. So I'm following an international standard as well as the Alberta standard. So I found there are a few different approaches that these kinds of things take. The IB, because of its international scale, needs to be extremely standardized and is very old school. In fact, the exams I write for it are all in pen and on paper, and they'll take months to grade because they are hand marked by people in sitting in Switzerland or across the world even. But and then with the Alberta curriculum, it's a little bit less rigid due to the smaller scale of it. But again, I think there's issues with both of them, mainly that they don't give enough time for kids to actually learn. With the tutoring model that was proposed by, sorry, Emerson, I found that really interesting because I think that would be something a lot of students would actually appreciate. Most students right now, again, as I've said earlier, are they're just cramming for tests, they're cramming for exams. A lot of these kids are actually very interested or very curious as to these subjects or other subjects as well, except they just don't have the resources or time available. So with the introduction of AI and with the introduction of learning on your own, I feel like this may be able to finally take a load off of teachers. They won't have to focus on 30 kids at a time. They may only have to focus on two or three. My business teacher, for example, he is a avid advocate for AI in education. So all of his resources currently are created by AI. However, I feel that he's failing in his application because he's using AI to create the resources, but applying it in the same manner that he used to. So I feel like there are a lot of differences, and the private model relieves these kinds of things and provides better quality education purely due to the fact that they have more resources and more time to actually ingrain the knowledge into you and how to apply it rather than just memorize it.
Well, we focus in this discussion on education with the student in mind. We haven't really focused at all on the teacher and the curriculum that teachers go through in becoming, quote, certified as teachers, and whether or not that certification process is aligned with what the student needs or what the teacher needs. And I find it intriguing to look at the intermediary to the learning process being a teacher and how we actually educate teachers. And I've been exposed to some of the educational processes which were very much about discipline and very little about individualized, well, call it tutoring or counseling, or deferring counseling off to some other party. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Emerson. Thank you, Jeet. I apologize on behalf of Natalie and Rajesh, who had to bail out, and Rachel, who couldn't make it here today, or Vivek and Michael. So now on to the viewpoints of our guests. Anyone have any particular comment that they'd like to add to enrich to the discussion, or questions you might have of the panel itself? I know I've waxed on a little bit. Go ahead, Shirley. I see you're not muted. Is there a point you'd like to make?
I had a question because during our educational process, they emphasize competition, but you get into the work environment and the emphasis is on collaboration. Do they have any comments of how to alter the education system to encourage collaboration as opposed to the competition.
You want to, Emerson, you're probably a little closer to politics and therefore to policies. Anything you want to share with Shirley there?
I mean, it's I'm not sure on the premise of the question because a lot of workplaces are still, I mean, they talk about collaboration, but there's still a lot of, I mean, there's both. There's competition and there's collaboration in the workplace. I mean, on the education side, okay, collaboration, you learn collaboration through group projects, project-based work. That's one element. The other is, I mean, there's a strong element of competition in education because you're competing for the best grades, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, so I would challenge your questions and say we probably need less collaboration and we need more competition with a focus on cultivating the most able students that we possibly can, who then go into the workplace and are very competitive in terms of being the best that they can be. We're talking at high level, but I'd say less collaboration, more competition.
If I
And
may
being-
add on to that,
As a tool for triggering the best that we can be, using competition.
Exactly. Be better and better and better, and we should be
But
competing with each other to
and
be
Shirley
better.
may be getting at this point. Of course, in a competitive environment, there are those that just can't compete and bail out and just stop and do not pursue the best that they can be because they have failed in that setting. So the question then becomes, if no child will be left behind, then every child will pass, and that's not competition. So either some will be left behind or some will do things differently. And I think therein lies the policy dilemma we have in education is you don't want to break children in the competitive process. You'd like them all to thrive in some manner and to become, quote, the very best they can be. My own experience in dealing in the field of mental retardation for years was to give even the most profoundly disabled opportunities to make choices. Now, you might think that's a little bizarre when you're talking about a child who can't feed himself, can't talk, can't be toilet trained, can't dress himself, is profoundly or seriously handicapped, and yet giving him a clicker that could indicate that he wanted to eat or he had a need was something that he had never learned before. So teach him something that basic was to recognize every individual is a learner, even though some may not aspire as high as others. One of the characteristics of being a human being is the capacity to learn, even though it may be severely limited among some. And I know Dale will agree with me there. Okay, Peter, your turn. You're muted.
Thank you, Perry, and I'd like to say thank you all to the contribution you made today. I'd just also like to comment on, I think, the future of the work that people are going to go through as you go through your education, no matter what level of accomplishment you achieve in terms of whether you graduate or don't even graduate from high school and go on. But I think the future of work is going to actually be not different jobs. It's going to be different careers. You will find that you start off with maybe a passion, or maybe you just need a job to pay the bills. You take it on because that's the easiest thing you can do. It's right there for you. You take it on. But I think, in fact, a lot of the future for young people is as you grow up and as others are like in myself, and I feel I'm a pioneer in some regard. I'm in my 7th career. And high school didn't prepare me for any of those careers in the sense of the subject matter, but it did prepare me for how to think clearly, how to take a problem apart and put it back together. So there's a reductionist and a build-up synthesizing kind of experience I certainly got. I also think that it's really critical to have those kind of instructors who stand in front of you in a classroom, in the classic sense, and you could label them teacher, because they instill in you some kind of a motivation, like several of you have given examples, as did Perry. I can remember the name of some of my influential public school as well as high school teachers, and that was like, I graduated from high school almost 60 years ago. So I think this future is going to be a lot of different careers. That's my comment, and I welcome your thoughts.
Well, my takeaway from your comment just now is a word that you didn't use, and I think it sort of summarizes virtually everything you say. Your education enabled you and prepared you to make choices.
Yes.
And those choices were your capacity and readiness to make choices as opposed to ducking them or hiding or fearing them is what enabled you to move from one career to another without fear is you had learned how to make choices. That's what critical thinking is.
Yes, but maybe I have to caveat on that though. I don't know whether this is normal, but yes, it certainly got me to know how to make choices. And I mean, even having a paper route, which young lad, the paper route, that was also very valuable because you learn about how to do a little bit of arithmetic on the fly when you're doing your collections, and you get to be how to interact with people of all different ages and different levels of complaining and so on.
The more experience we have, whether it be paper routing or a stockkeeper in a drugstore as I was, or a lawnmower or whatever, the more experience you have, the more exposure you have to situations where you begin to learn you have the capacity to make choices. It is you, it's not, you're right. It's what makes life meaningful, where you are in charge instead of a victim because you are making choices in the course of your life instead of being passive, which was an article which I recently put together about passively waiting versus actively pursuing. The difference between being passive and taking action is the difference between existing and engaged in life, living itself, making life your choice, as opposed to being a victim of circumstances. Okay, I don't see out of the hand, so you're all victims, of me making a choice, and I know you all well enough to know you're just itching to make a comment. So I'm going to call on Jeff first. Given some of the comments we made about AI along the way, AI being a tool of exploring as opposed to a passive instrument, you want to add anything there, Jeff?
Well, I wasn't going to add anything on that topic, but I was struck during the comments by Emerson and Rajesh and Jeet about something that I mentioned in a different webinar that I was in earlier today, and I made the comment that I don't believe you can teach curiosity, and that you can awaken curiosity if you're in that role. And many people described influential instructors or professors that they had that awakened something in them, ignited a passion in them. And that got me thinking about the work of Angela Duckworth, who wrote a book called Grit. And she explored what was the difference that made the difference for people that were successful in certain environments when others were failing. And so she really studied perseverance and passion, and I think what we've been hearing from this series, Perry, is from a group of people who have their passion, their interest has already been ignited. I mean, we heard about Jeet being part of the IB program, and Rajesh was the RA program, and Emerson, very eloquently described his educational journey. So they had something that was ignited in them. And I'm not worried about any of them or any of the other youth panelists that you've had. I'm worried about the young people that aren't here, the ones that are struggling in our educational system, the ones that are, using ChatGPT not as a tool to augment their learning, but to act as a crutch and using it to answer questions and not gaining anything from the interaction. So I'd be curious to know if we can capture that lightning in a bottle and figure out what it is that ignites that interest and passion in our young people, and figure out how to do that more frequently in our school system.
Well, Jeff, I think that is the challenge that every parent has that loves their child and wants to see their child mature and become curious and to be actively engaged in their life, is how to light the fire, not with the cane in the old days or a switch, but how to inspire them to be curious about the life that they have ahead of them. And the same with every teacher, that a teacher is challenged once a year with 30 new kids or whatever in front of her to create an environment and an experience that inspires that child to want to dig even more, to thirst to go to the next year, because they're so curious about what it is that they're being exposed to. I agree with you 100%. How to inspire those to aspire, as
Yeah.
Dale would put it, aspiration being one of the gifts of a life, is to have that curiosity to wake up in the morning and want to have another one.
Yeah.
Just another exciting day of experience. Okay, Randall, you've expressed some points on the chat. Do you want to share any of them, any of your questions or commentaries with the group?
Yeah, sure. Talking about tipping points or turning points, I just want to add that, and you mentioned the Durants, the history of, for me, a turning point in high school when I was about 16 was the guidance counselor who gave me the book on Durant's history of philosophy. He was astute enough to understand that I was a natural philosopher. I had already been meditating, and I didn't even know what meditation was. But the kinds of encouragement that you get from some special teachers or influences can make a world of a difference. So I would say for all of us, try to be each other's best mentor and guide, guru, if you want. Well, my curiosity of philosophy, of course, translates into a curiosity about everything, because there is a philosophy of everything. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing more important in your character profile than a tendency towards curiosity. If you want to understand who you are and what the world is around you, start with the fundamentals, the ontology, the metaphysics, the axiology. I'm going through the list I've been working on lately. But understand that it's all integrated, because right now what I'm working on is a philosophy of management. And I'm not just using the word philosophy in some kind of hip cultural kind of way. I mean seriously, because in the world that we're facing coming our way, we have to do a major paradigm shift. I mean, it takes something like we're talking AI and education. If you look at the history of paradigm shifts and disruptive technologies, these things are very difficult to navigate. It's difficult to anticipate where they're going. You'll find a flurry of alternative applications, some of which will be long forgotten, others which will begin to dominate our imaginations and market share and so on. So, but every one of us is in a position to be a part of that migration or evolution. But we need to have the curiosity and the perspective to be able to make that influence. But again, as I studied existentialism as a teenager, we are defining humanity with each and everything that we do today, and we're shaping our future and the future possibilities for today's generation and the next and beyond.
Well, certainly given the rate of change and the breadth of change. I mean, AI touches and will touch virtually every aspect of our lives and our careers. And it isn't just AI. There are shifts going on at the institutional level. There are shifts going on in the knowledge base. There are shifts going on in processes. One might say these are scary times, or one might say these are probably one of the most exciting times in history. And to live at this time with curiosity is to embrace it all and to try and consume and understand the breadth and depth of what's going on and what it means to us as individuals, what it means to our families and our values. So I, for one, and I think it's representative of many of the people that are part of this network, it's not fear that drives us. It's the excitement of change. And the learning that goes along with it. And many of us are ready. And I think what we've seen in our youth, and we'll deal with this next week in the concluding wrap up of what have we learned about the young people. And yes, it was a selective group. Thank you, Jeet. Thank you, Emerson. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Rajesh. I mean, you've all inspired us because we see in youth or in young people a readiness to embrace change and to recognize the relevance of learning, not just in an educational sense, but in a lifelong sense. That's exciting. It means that the leaders are evolving, which are not afraid of tomorrow, but are shaping it. So thank you, Jeet. Thank you, Emerson. And for those that aren't with us today, I thank them as well, as I will next week, and hopefully you'll all join us next week. Mel, anything you want to share with us, or Bogdan? Mel, go ahead.
I think the one thing that I have to echo here has been expressed by Peter as well as I think Jeff. The comments that Jeet and Emerson have made are just 100% representative of the top of the crop, the cream of the crop, with respect to the number of people that are out there. You guys have learned not only from school, but from experience, and you're showing it here today. I think that, all of us, I can remember back in high school, I had, some profs that were, I don't want to say idols, but they were representative of people who really had a passion for what they were teaching. And university, the same thing. But, that's going back about 60 years or so. Things have changed a lot. And Peter, I think I'm up there with you with respect to the number of careers over the period of time since I got out of university. But one of the things that I think I've learned is that my engineering background really has kind of helped me assess some potential of people. The capability to take something complex and simplify it has always been something that really intrigued me. I found it quite interesting to do that. I don't expect everybody to understand and be able to apply math, chemistry, physics, all that type of stuff, just as I hope they wouldn't expect me to apply the details of philosophy and politics and all of that. Although I do read the papers, I do watch some TV on that as well. But I guess the learning to be curious is one thing that I think all of you have started at a very early age, and learning how to learn. You've learned how to learn already, and I know that you'll all continue to do that. The future potential is something that is really difficult for any of us to describe, but with an open mind, we can really be receptive to it. So I think all of you have the capability of being the adult in the room, if I can summarize it that way. And I just wish you all the best.
Thanks. Peter, brief, then I'm going to ask Alona.
Yes, okay, thank you. I was just going to say, I was just recently asked actually to read a chapter of a book to a high school class as part of Reading Week, which is run by the Ottawa Public Library. And I was asked to read this chapter to the high school I graduated from. So I just told them what grade I was interested in talking to, because I thought later on, they're getting close to getting out of high school, I had some thoughts. And so the three things that I stressed that they should be thinking about in their next stage of education, and they still had a little bit of high school to go, was that the number one thing is their curiosity. So the very subject we've been talking about, and curiosity in one of two ways. Either you have it already. I had curiosity as a kid. I'm sure many of you did. You'd turn over a rock to see what was under it. You'd take a magnifying glass to see small things in the leaves, the structure of a leaf, etc. That's curiosity. So either you have it right away, you start using it, or it's actually triggered in you. And we talked about that too. And I bet some of the curiosity I've gained from being triggered as well. So that's number one. Number two is the drive. In other words, you've got the energy, the commitment to believe in what you're doing, and that you try your best. And you don't repeat like Einstein's famous quote about if you fail to do it the first time, don't keep repeating it the same way for the next time and the next time. Try different ways. Be innovative. Yeah. So drive is I think really important, or determination to achieve what you are trying to achieve, and to find ways around it if you're not successful at the initial ways of attacking it. And the third component, which is I think fundamental, and it applies all through life, is to have good, stimulating mentors. Mm-hmm. So those were the 3 points that I gave my class, the takeaways. And then I read to them a section of a book on making the atomic bomb. It's a famous book that is one of the historical books on the making of the atomic bomb, and the story of a guy named Leo Szilard is what I read about. And it's an amazing tale about how this man's curiosity drove him to do what he did. He, by the way, was the man who wrote the letter that Albert Einstein signed and sent to Roosevelt to create the Manhattan Project.
Well, thank you. Hopefully those students will go on not to invent something as, well, I won't.
Destructive.
Barry, you're not muted, so I presume there's something you'd like to share.
It's a different approach. It's not mine, but I come from the board chair of Olds College for their centennial. So I do have a bit of understanding of the system. And I will remind most of you know we lost a grandson, an adult grandson who had a master's degree from Georgetown University out of frustration with trying to get him so he could contribute the way he wanted to contribute. Now that's the downside. The plus side of that is his younger brother, who has, as of this spring, 2 mathematics degrees from the University of Calgary, and is one is teaching, and I'm not sure what the other is because it goes way over my head. But he had the opportunity to, and there's a message in this from him. He had the opportunity to go into a private school to teach math. And he turned down that opportunity, and he's accepted an opportunity supported by the elders in an Indigenous reservation. I won't say which one, because mathematics is foreign to the Indigenous people. And he has the power and will in his knowledge apply what he was taught immediately, and he has the power to create the curriculum for the reservation schools K to 12 in mathematics. And I think more and more the message I get from that is that you and me, Perry, have to step aside and grease the wheels for what's coming along behind us, who are dealing with a world that is moving so fast that it's beyond our training to be able to accommodate the important decisions. And we're going to have to put up with mistakes, because young people do that, but they learn from them, the learners. And you've had a good panel of those learners that we need to stand aside, Emerson, and let you and the others that come from your generation that lead, Jeet, you too, and let you get out, and any way we can support you, the rest of us that are on this panel right now. I look, and I still am the oldest, but that's the lesson I learned from within my own family is we got to somehow grease the wheels so that those in the generation that is graduating from high school and going into the workforce, graduating from colleges and going into the workforce, graduating from PhD programs and going into the workforce, aren't encumbered by the encumbrances that we naturally have and have made for them.
Thanks, Barry. Jeet, you had a point you want to make?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for having us on. It's amazing to connect with different generations of people, especially when this is a time of such uncertainty. And I just wanted to point out the point that Barry made about making mistakes and how that's become more and more unacceptable in recent years, especially when you're considering people at young ages. If you make one mistake, Let's say, for example, a sort of extreme example, something like a police record. At this point in time, if you somehow get that, it's over for you. You're most likely not going to be able to do a lot of things with your life, like in the traditional sense, or even something as simple as insurance. If you look at car accidents, if a kid or a teenager has a car accident, they're going to be punished for the rest of their life in the form of insurance premiums. There's no more room for mistakes anymore. And I feel like you made a very good point of recognizing the need for space for that, especially at a young age when they can recover from such.
That's an important point, and not one that hasn't been made. And sharing with us something that is relatively new. The if it don't break, if it ain't broke, break it. It is part of a philosophy of recognizing that we're going to make mistakes, and we encourage people to make choices and not be afraid of mistakes. What you're pointing out is there are consequences. The institutional infrastructure that has been built has become increasingly intolerant or overvaluing perfection. And that's a paradox. And I need to wrestle with that. Ilona?
Thank you to Emerson and Jeet and yourselves for such an excellent presentation. And in the words of the great Canadian novelist Robertson Davies, he says the most important thing is a passionate teacher, eccentric if that's the way it goes. And, just great on Emerson and Jeet for pointing that out, and to all of you for remembering your teachers. And I have an example of two history teachers. One was in grade 9 who literally read from the textbook at dates and memorizing wars. And the second one was Ralphie McCall. He was so passionate. And he would show us pictures of the Greek gods and goddesses with their bottoms covered. He would lift the paper to cover the statues. But he engaged us in such a passionate way. And I will love and remember Ralphie forever. And kudos to those of you who've taught and engaged curiosity. And I got heck from the very beginning because my first doll, I took it apart to see what was inside. And that's my story. So thank you, all of you.
Well, you've inspired, and I think I can appreciate putting paper over those statues would certainly trigger curiosity. Bogdan.
My hope, my positive expectations, so to speak, from AI go in the direction of us being able to know who we are better. So Perry, the whole thing with temperament and personalities and character, personal values, and in this way discover with more comfort what is our place in our context. Yeah, what kind of work are we good at? What kind of engagements enable the best out of us, and so on and so on. So this is one of the positive expectations that I have from the state AI goes towards. I've just published a model that was worked with a couple of LLMs on this topic exactly. And the other comment that I wanted to bring, it's about enable individuals that are normally considered as being, let's say, handicapped or challenged. Again, AI is an excellent translator. If it is a tool that bridges between different languages and different worlds, this is the AI. And I have a deep confidence and respect for the power of the mind over vast majority of living beings. So again, my hopes on the positive side from the development of AI is this capability to integrate individuals and capabilities that were more difficult to integrate before.
Thank you, Bogdan. I think in wrap up, we didn't spend a lot of time about AI, but it certainly did percolate and season the discussion from time to time. And I think one of the concerns is that AI will become an alternative to human beings rather than an aid, and others see AI as an aid to all of the human processes. For those of us that are optimistic, curious, continuous learners, and engaged in this journey into the future, we see AI as a friend. But then we need to be sober about that as well. So I thank all of you for today. This was an exciting, comprehensive, insightful session. Thank you, Jeet. Thank you, Emerson, very much, and all of you that have contributed.